Hello, it is Thursday, the 28th of April. We are at the end of week 2, which means there are 7 weeks left in this term. You're watching, you're listening, we're alive. This is PLAR History and Geography here at WASA. We are always inspiring change through distance education since 1990. And once again, my name is Jonathan. I am a teacher for this course. We're on term 2B. Just want to remind everyone, here we go, that the deadline to submit PLAR work, the deadline to submit PLAR work for all the PLAR students is on Friday, the 17th of June, Friday, June the 17th. That is the last official day to submit any work for any PLAR students. The last day to submit WASA PLAR assignments, again, is Friday, June 17th. WASA PLAR teachers, so myself, Andrea, Bonnie, and Jovi, we're off during the summer. We're not here for term 3, and we will be returning on August the 29th, 2016. So which means that you have, again, like I said, 7 more weeks-ish or so to get those assignments in. That way we can mark it, you can do your tests, and move on from there. So again, continue to work hard on your assignments, chip away at it, finish them. But again, the deadline is Friday, June the 17th to submit any work. If you submit any work after the deadline of June the 17th, we will not mark it because we're not here, and it will have to wait until September. So again, work hard, get them done. That way we can mark them. And that applies for all PLAR students, whether you're taking English, math, science, or my social studies component, history and geography. Just to remind everyone, again, you can radio, listen, call the WASA studio, and you want to participate and listen. Again, you can always get in touch with me during my office hours. Just give me a phone call. Fax any assignments. You can call me during my cell on evenings, on weekends. Again, email me, Facebook me. Again, all the lessons are posted on the archive page and in my YouTube channel if you can't make it to class. So again, many ways you can engage as well. Again, you need your textbook and your workbook. The textbook contains all the content for history and geography, lesson 1 to lesson number 5. Again, your workbook contains all your assignments for history and geography, lesson 1 to lesson 5. Again, if you have internet access, talk to your DC and they can hook you up and log on to the Smart Bridget software. That way you can see my notes, my screens, and the rest of the stuff that I posted. If you don't have internet access, that's all right. Just let us know. We can always figure something out. We can always send you a USB stick with all the lessons and notes absolutely for free. Again, all those are the same. All those are outlined on the course guideline study guide. No changes there. Again, if you have any questions, again, just let me know throughout my lesson. I noticed that we got Lillian on the line with us again over in Waterman. So again, thank you, Lillian, for joining us. Hopefully you can hear me. We'll figure that out shortly. But yeah, hopefully, Lillian, you're there in Waterman and you can hear me. And hopefully we'll get you on the line very, very shortly. All right. So over the next 60 minutes, over the next hour, our goal for today is to, number 1, finish what we talked about last class in terms of Canada's involvement and contribution during World War I. And then we'll finish that up, go over questions on assignment number 2. We'll wrap that up. And then we'll begin today's lesson on Canada's in the 20s and in the 30s, next decade. Can you hear me now, Lillian? Oh, I know you're there. Hopefully you can hear me. Hopefully we can figure that out and sort that out shortly. But before we do, let's continue. And hopefully Lillian is there and she can engage and ask questions as we continue. So we're going to quickly do a bit of review on the first few slides of what we talked about in terms of what we talked about last class. Lesson number 1, Canada's involvement during the First World War I. That took place between 1914 to 1918. Okay, just to give you a bit of time frame, a timeline of which decade and period we are dealing with. All right, our learning goals last class were Robert Borden, how World War I started, conscription, home front, what Canada did at home. We'll talk about battles in a bit. We'll talk about income war tax, and we'll wrap things up by looking at the conclusion of World War I with the Treaty of Versailles. And as promised, we'll go over assignment number 2. All right, a bit of review. During this time period, European countries, there were a lot of tensions going on. Everyone wanted to be the best. Everyone wanted land ownership. They wanted wealth. They wanted to be bigger and stronger. Different balance of power, where some nations were way stronger and powerful than others. Again, everyone wanted to expand their empire, expand their influences upon others, as they believed that their lifestyles and culture were the best. Other main factors that contributed to the start of World War I, again, there was no particular point that led to the cause of World War I. Again, there were different factors of chain events that took place over time that developed, and based on timing and development during that time period, it was just bound to happen, and it just did. But factors that contributed were militarism. Again, everyone wanted to be the big, bad, biggest army, whether it's on land or in the sea, in the navy. Alliance. Again, different countries had alliance where they would support others in terms of time and conflicts if something arises. In other words, a country will have someone else's back if they protect them. So again, it's a purpose of protection, security purpose as well if they were under attack or if something was to happen. 3, imperialism, basically imposing or influencing their culture and lifestyles and lived experience onto others as they believed that they're best. Again, everyone wanted to expand their empire. Everyone thought they were better than others. So again, that was another factors and contribution as well. And lastly, nationalism, the sense of pride within their country based on community, language, and other factors where people will do absolutely everything to protect their country, fight for their country so that they can maintain their culture. So those were the main factors that were developing, and we talked about Archduke Franz Ferdinand, the Austrian-Hungarian Empire that was assassinated, and then Austria-Hungary attacked Serbia, Germany announced support for Austria-Hungary, Russia announced support for Serbia, Germany invaded Belgium, and then Britain eventually supported Belgium and eventually declared war on Germany on August 4th, 1914. So not just one factors, but different series of factors led to World War I. We talked about who fought during World War I. Again, we got the Central Powers, the Triple Alliance. Again, consisted of Germany, Austria-Hungary, Italy, and they fought against the Triple Entente, otherwise known as the Allies, where we have Britain, France, Russia, and we have ourselves, Canada, was involved as well. Again, it's really important to note that Canada during this time period, we were linked to the British Empire. Whatever Britain did, Canada did as well. As a result, if Britain declared war, Canada was involved as well. We had no other choice. We were a colony of the British Empire, and we had to support Britain during this time period. Again, this is just a little map of what Europe looked like prior to start of World War I. We got countries. This landscape and this map of different boundaries and territories will eventually change at the conclusion of World War One. You'll see that in a few more slides up ahead. We talked about Mr. Robert Borden, the man that's on our 100 Canadian dollar bill. He was our prime minister during this time period. He promised British support and help during the war effort. Canadians, we were excited at first. We heard the news that a war broke out in Europe, and we were just absolutely excited. But later on, that excitement changed due to fear of dying. As a result, not many people stepped up and supported and volunteered to go fight. Mainly English Canadians said yes, but a majority of French Canadian speakers said no and did not step up. Like I mentioned, Canada was linked to the British Empire. There was never a doubt about whether or not Canada would be involved during World War One. The answer would be yes. The question that I posed was, to what extent? How much support will Canada lend a hand to? Again, Canada definitely was excited. Haven't seen a war in almost a century, so pretty much a big deal. A lot of Canadians, mainly English Canadians, stepped up and volunteered. But after around 1916, that number dropped. It declined. Not many people stepped up and volunteered. And as a result, something needed to be done. And as a result of that, conscription. As you recall, conscription was a Canadian federal law that was created that basically forced young men ages between 15 to 44, give or take, to join war. They had no choice. They had to go. When they were called upon, they had to go. But again, a lot of French Canadians opposed it, did not show up when called upon. Again, very controversial issue still today in terms of Canadian history. Again, not everyone was eligible to go fight in the war. However, Canadians were enlisted from across the countries, not just here in Ontario, but across the nation. Again, not all were recruited and not all were welcome to go fight overseas. They were selected based on the age. Again, you had to be roughly between the age 15 to age 44. They were also selected on health, ethnicity, and other factors too. If they did not have good health, they were not recruited. So again, a lot of factors come into play, but a lot of men were forced. They had no choice, but they had to go since many Canadians did not volunteer or stepped up. Home front. This is pretty much where we left off last class. Canada during the home front. So during World War One, here in Canada, a lot of people helped out. Women of all ages, children even helped out. Men that did not qualify for military service also stepped up. So pretty much the home front were activities that took place here in Canada, civilian activities during the war, the civilian effort and activity at home in support of war wages overseas. So again, a lot of women stepped up. They took jobs that were once held by men. Even children stepped up. They created care packages. They got donation. They were also known as something known as soldier of the soil, where they would work on the farm to produce goods and agriculture products. Thus, we need to produce food, weapon, clothing, medical supplies for our troops overseas. So again, Canada, huge effort. Again, a lot of care packages, a lot of youth organizations, social groups were developed, a lot of discussion in the media. So whatever you did back then, everyone knew that a war was happening and Canada was involved. Churches, schools, all talked about it. A lot of discussions. Everyone was aware. Everyone stepped up, did something in order to help with the war efforts, otherwise known as the home front. So again, class, there will be a question on assignment 2 in regards to the home front. What we need to remember for that, we produce food, weapons, and goods for our troops overseas here in Canada. So we did not contribute it just internationally in battles and overseas in Europe, but we also did it domestically here in Canada in our own land. Going to war was not cheap. Going to war was not cheap. As a matter of fact, it was extremely expensive. In 1914, the Canadian economic was in a recession, not a good state. We had loans from the United States and even in Britain. And we needed to find alternative means and funding to supply and pay for the war efforts. We originally thought the estimated costs of World War I and going to battles and other products, goods, was around 185 million. But that was not the case. The final cost was actually $1.2 billion. So, as a result, we need to find alternative ways to finance the war efforts here in Canada. Hence why we got something known as the income war tax. What was the income war tax? Well, basically, wealthy Canadians were called upon to help contribute to the war efforts. Because, again, like I mentioned, going to war was expensive, high cost of war. The income war tax was designed to be temporary, where the Canadian federal government collected funds from wealthy Canadians. Federal tax on businesses in 1916, but that later became known as the personal income tax in 1917. And as a result of this event, we will still have income tax or taxes today. It's supposed to be temporary, but it wasn't. And a matter of fact, we still have it today. So, again, another factor back then that impacted us nowadays, income war tax. Finding ways to finance support for the war. Again, calling upon wealthy Canadians to contribute to the war efforts, collecting money, paying a fee, otherwise known as income war tax. It's supposed to be temporary, but we still have it today. Alright, battles. Let's talk about some of the battles that took place. In your textbook, it talks about 2 different battles. One, the Battle of Ypres and the Battle of Vimy Ridge. So let's go over some of these details about why these battles were significant. So the first one, the Battle of Ypres, took place in France in 1915. Canadians fought in this battle. What made this battle significant was that German troops used a brand new weapon for the first time ever, known as chlorine gas. It's chlorine gas or mustard gas. It was a greenish yellow gas that if a troop or a soldier inhale it or breathe in it, they will eventually gag, cough, choke, and eventually suffocate and die. Okay, it also burned the eyes, nose, and lungs, and other factors as well. It really caught a lot of soldiers and troops off guard. But what Canadians did, that we improvised. We used cotton pads soaked in urine and applied to our face, which neutralized the chlorine. So again, it really caught a lot of guards and troops off guard. hence making this battle, the Battle of the Ypres, really, really significant as the German troops used a brand new weapon known as chlorine gas. Another battle that was mentioned in your textbook was the Battle of Vimy Ridge. Very significant battles in terms of Canada. Canadian soldiers, we Canadians fought extremely well. It was our first military victory. Go Canada. And as a result, we were awarded 4 Victorian Crosses. Okay, very significant battle in terms of Canadian history. It really allowed Canada to emerge as an independent nation on its own from this point. With this military victory, people started to realize that Canada can fight on its own and be its own nation. Again, Canadians won, brought a lot of sense of pride, a lot of sense of nationalism here in Canada. Okay, so those are the two two battles that was mentioned in your textbook. But those are not just the 2 battles that took place during World War I, during this 4-year time period. There are also battles known as the Somme Battle, where British used tanks for the first time. It was slow. Tanks were slow. It got stuck in mud, but it allowed British troops to break through barriers and barbed wires and allowed troops to advance and continue fighting. Another battle that was significant that you may have heard of was the Battle of Passchendaele. Yeah, I believe this battle was significant as it was fought in absolutely terrible weather conditions, raining, muddy, and so forth. Again, those are just some of the battles that took place during World War I, but really focus on the Battle of the Ypres and the Battle of Vimy Ridge. Again, a bit more about what the battles were like. Again, a lot of troops fought in trenches warfare. That's where soldiers lived, stayed. Even in winter times, it was basically home for them for months. They ate, they slept, they fought in these trenches. They ate corned beef, bread, tea. There was rows of 2 meters deep with sandbags. They climbed in and out of these trenches. Okay, so imagine one side and another side. In the middle, you got an area known as no man's land, where no one actually controlled that land. A lot of barbed wires, bullets were everywhere. Rain eventually filled these trenches. It was wet, cold, and muddy. A lot of disease broke out, body lice, and even rats. So, not a good, fun time. And as a result, people got sick, people died, not just in battles, but based on diseases and health conditions as well. Also in World War I, it was not just fought on land, but also fought in the air as well. So there was planes shooting other planes. It was also fought in the sea with U-boats, submarines from the Germans. Okay. Again, there's a bit of background content that I like to plug in as well. The conclusion of World War I. Eventually, it ended. Canada and the Triple Entente with the Allies defeated Germany and the Triple Alliance. World War I eventually concluded on November 11th, 1918, which officially marked the ending of the war. Hence why we use Remembrance Day here in Canada, as on the 11th month, 11th day, on the 11th hour. We take time to reflect and thank our soldiers who fought for our freedom, the protection of our countries, not just in World War I and World War II, but it could be the Cold War, current war that we're fighting in recently in Afghanistan and whatnot, and the war against terrorism. Again, Remembrance Day, November 11th, we always take time to reflect and thank those who fought and served, whether it's men, women, and children. The conclusion of World War One led to a treaty known as the Treaty of Versailles. Okay? Remember, a treaty is not a law. A treaty is just an agreement between two bodies of people. It was signed on June the 28th, 1919. There was a guilt clause in it. And it pretty much blamed Germany for causing the war, pointing fingers at Germany for causing the war. And as a result, within the Treaty of Versailles, it imposed heavy penalties on Germany where they had to pay for damages, give back all the land that they acquired or conquered, and it allowed troops to stay in Germany to oversee them. So that's the Treaty of Versailles. Again, what we need to remember is the guilt clause. Okay? Because of the Treaty of Versailles, it led to a brand new look in Europe. So at the end of World War One, Europe looked absolutely completely different. We had the emergence of different countries and nations. We got Russia, otherwise known as the USSR during this time period, the Soviet Union, under the communist power government regime. We had countries, otherwise known as Eastern Europe. Okay, Eastern Europe. We had Yugoslavia, Romania, fall of the Austrian-Hungarian Empire. Now we just have Hungary, Poland, a lot of Baltics countries, Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia emerge. Okay, so the map of Europe now looks completely different because Germany had to give back all the land that they had acquired. Germany is now completely smaller than it was compared to World War One. So that's the outcome of World War One, and as a result, that was because of the Treaty of Versailles. Almost done here. Almost done. League of Nations. The League of Nations was formed after World War One by numerous countries, not just one, not just two, but numerous countries. Even Canada was involved in it. And the goal of the League of Nations was simply to prevent any future wars. Stop it. We don't want it to ever happen again. We want to help settle disputes through negotiations, talking-wise, if there was a problem. So that was the goal of the League of Nations. Again, it was set up by numerous countries where they said that if something was to happen or arise, we would not let another war break out, and we will settle it through negotiations. As a result, that was the purpose of the League of Nations. As we'll learn later on, they did not really do much. They did not achieve their goals. As we know, World War II broke out. Alright, wrapping things up. Canada's legacy during World War One. Talk about Canada's legacies, Canada's involvement, what we did, and what came out of World War One for Canada. There were unprecedented amount of volunteer support, where at first many Canadians were excited, thrilled, happy with happy faces, stepped up and volunteered. There was also unprecedented government involvement in Canadian lives. Yes, the Canadian created laws and acts that forced young men known as conscription to join war and have to fight overseas. It also began the Canadian social welfare system here in Canada. Britain started to realize it needs Canada. Canada now is just not a country, not just a country that is a part of the British Empire, colony of Britain, but Britain starts to realize, hey, we need Canada actually. Canada signed the Treaty of Versailles as an independent nation. We know what the Treaty of Versailles includes. World War One proves Canada is a nation of the world. We made a statement for ourselves. Overseas in battles, our troops and our soldiers represented Canada extremely well. As we know, we won the Battle of Vimy Ridge. brought the sense of pride, sense of nationalism here in Canada. Canada also contributed on the home front, instrumental to a successful war effort. So, not just fighting overseas, but the contribution of men, women, children, doing what they can, creating supplies, shipping supplies for our troops overseas. But not all was good. A lot of racism, and racial prejudice still was a factor in Canada. Bit of indigenous content that I'm going to plug in. Status Indian did not join military. They were not allowed to. So at first, any First Nations, Indigenous, Aboriginal, status Indian did not join. But after 1916, 1917, when Canada needed more men in support, Aboriginal Canadians were eventually allowed to be enlisted. However, their contribution to the war effort was really ignored after the war. There was a man named Francis Fagamangabau, famous First Nation Aboriginal sniper, fought extremely well in Canadian, but his contribution and his recognition was not really recognized afterwards. So I can see, as we continue looking at Canadian history since the 20th century and see the progress of First Nation and Indigenous population, it's still being ignored by Canada. We needed First Nations, they helped, they stepped out, but their recognition and contribution was ignored afterwards. So that pretty much wraps up last class lesson on Canada's involvement and contribution in World War I, 1914 to 1918. So let's spend a bit of time right now, class, and go over questions on assignment number 2. Still part of lesson number 1. Again, please use full, complete sentences. That's what I'm looking for. Just to remind class that these assignments are just an indication to me that you're ready to write the test. What really matters is the test or the exam. The mark that you receive on the test or on the exam. That's the one that really counts. Not so much the assignments, even though that you still have to do them. By doing and completing the assignments, it just indicates to me that you are ready to do the test. Okay, I know that we're all critical thinkers, but my goal is to help all my students become something known as, something I discovered was flexible thinking. Flexible thinking. The importance of critical thinking, being creative, thinking as well. So we're improvising what we learn as well. Okay, because what we learn today may not necessarily apply to what we learn or know tomorrow. Okay, I must understand where we as an individual stand in the world and our place. So being flexible as a thinker. Okay, not just thinking critically, thinking outside the box, thinking from different perspective, being a flexible thinker. Being a flexible thinker. All right, question number 1. What was conscription? Okay, so details describing me what was conscription. 2 marks. Question number 2. Provide the names of some details each of the 2 battles that was mentioned in the text in World War I. So details, names of the battles. Okay, I'll mark each for the name and a mark for telling me the details of the battles. Question 3, income war tax. Describe what is income war tax. Question 4, what was the guilt cause? And what did Germany have to do after the war based on the guilt cause? Okay. So again, straightforward questions. Pretty much just describing what happened, pretty much. Key events. Question 5, describe the League of Nations. what it was, and what its purpose, otherwise known as its goals. What did it want to achieve? And that right there, class, is assignment number 2. Pretty straightforward in terms of Canada and World War One. Any questions? Lillian, are you still there in Waterman right now? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah? Awesome. I noticed that you have submitted assignment number 6. Did you see your mark for that?
Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah, I posted it on your Facebook inbox, so good stuff. So significant improvement. You're doing well. That's exactly what I'm looking for. And just continue to progress from there. All right. Lillian, are you working on assignment number 7 right now?
Yeah.
Yeah. Is that done, or are you still working on it?
Still working on it.
Still working on it. Any questions with that?
Question 1.
Question number 1 for assignment 7. Okay. So let's spend a bit of time right now. I'll help you out, Lillian. Get you on track. Assignment 7, very short. 8 marks, 2 questions. So for Lillian's sake, question number 1 on assignment number 7, it asks, provide specific details to describe the Quiet Revolution. Why was the revolution necessary to the people of Quebec? And what did various politician leaders do in support? So that's kind of like a 3-part question. So your job right now, Lillian, is to turn to page 19 in your textbook. Page 19 in your textbook. Okay, and where's starting from the very top, it talks about the Quiet Revolution and the roots of Quebec nationalism. So what happened, Lillian, was that there was tension between English and French-speaking Canadian in a province in Quebec, or in Canada in general. Quebec, or French-speaking Canadians, thought that they had a different culture, different identity, away from the English-speaking, and they wanted to maintain that identity. So what all that is on the top of page 19. Okay. Did you want me to pull up those notes and those slides? Would that help you?
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay, let's do that. Alright, just give me a second here. I'm going to point you in the right direction, and then I'm going to continue with my lesson. Alright, so hopefully you can see my screen. I'm going to open up this slide where I talk about Quebec separatism, Quebec nationalism. Alright, this is the key slide here. Can you see this, Lillian? The roots of Quebec nationalism?
Yeah.
Alright, so I'm going to quickly go over these slides for you. English-speaking versus French-speaking Canadians. Again, they often disagreed about how Canada should be run and what it means to be Canadian. As we know that in Canada during that time period, there were 2 groups. The majority were English-speaking, and there was the minority group known as French-speaking. They often had disagreement, different views. Okay. French Canadians worry about English Canadians' influence on culture and economic. Okay, eventually Quebec wanted to be separated from Canada. They wanted to develop its own nation because they had different viewpoints and different political viewpoints. Okay, so that was the background content of what started the Quiet Revolution. Okay, so what we need to know is this slide. Okay, so the Quiet Revolution was a period of rapid and non-violent change responsible for the beginning of a modern, secularized Quebec. Okay, why it was called quiet? Because it was not achieved through guns or forces, but through magazines and newspaper articles to change political legislation. Okay, Quebec citizens, this is key right here, wanted to protect culture and their identity. Okay, because of those main factors of wanting to protect their culture and identity, the Quiet Revolution emerged. Quebec felt discriminated against socially, culturally, political, and economically. Okay, so that's what happened, or the details of the Quiet Revolution. Okay, again, Lillian, you can find all that on page 19 in your textbook. If you skim through that and even onto the next page. And it also asks you which political leader supported the revolution. And that political leader was named John Lesage. This guy right here. Okay, so find his name in the textbook, John Lesage, and what he wanted to do. Again, he wanted to make Quebec more modern, more secularized, more independent. He really established a Ministry of Education system where there was a French-speaking public school system. So he really supported and developed and caused and led the Quiet Revolution. All right there, Lillian? And then question number 2 just talks about the FLQ, what they were and what they did. Again, that's on page 20 in your textbook. Okay, so all you need, Lillian, is on page 19 and page 20 to answer those questions. Okay, so why don't you work on that right now? I'm gonna start my next lesson on Canada's in the 20s and 30s, and near the end, I'm gonna check up on you again to see how you're doing. Okay, again, at any point, Lillian, just feel free to ask any questions throughout my lessons. Okay, and that applies for anyone as well. Alright, so our main focus that was supposed to be today, we're still on lesson 1 class, and we're talking about after World War One. We're talking about Canada in the 20s and in the 30s. Those 2 decades. Okay, so our learning goal for this lesson. Yeah, we probably won't finish this lesson today, but we'll start it, see how far we get, and then we'll continue it next week. So the learning goals for this lesson is simply Canada's in the 20s and Canada's in the 30s, those 2 decades, otherwise known as Decade of Hope. And what happened in the 30s was the Great Depression, a sad time that really impacted everyone in Canada and the rest of the world. We're also looking at the temperance movement, key changes in terms of women's rights and women's movement, in terms of equality that emerged. And women and voting, as women prior to this could not vote, and what led to those changes. Okay, so those are the 2 main focus. We'll talk about what Canada was like and happened in the 20s. Then we'll talk about Canada's in the 30s. Then we'll move to the temperance movement and women and voting. Alright, some background content that I'm plugging in. Again, this is not in your textbook, but I'm just plugging this in to give us a bit of additional background content to see what Canada was like. So understanding Canada in the 1920s, we had 3 main factors: a new leadership, a new economy, and a new attitude. At the start of the decade, there was a man named Arthur Meighen. Many of you probably have never heard of. He was actually once, believe it or not, Canada's Prime Minister. He was our Prime Minister from 1920 to 21 and a bit of 1926. Very short period of time. He was not in office and power for a very, really long time. Megan, our Prime Minister then, he favored high tariffs, so high taxes, and he really ignored the increasing unemployment in Canada. Again, really didn't do too much to please the public and society of Canada. He was eventually asked to be the leader of Canada, Prime Minister, and he did. He said yes, but he refused to take oath as acting government. As a result, it led to a non-vote of confidence. As a result, an election was held, and he was not won, and we had a new Prime Minister named Mackenzie King. Mackenzie King, he was pretty much Canada's Prime Minister throughout the 20s and throughout the 30s, consistently. Okay, Mackenzie King, the man that's on our $50 Canadian bill. King was significant because what he did was that in 1931, there was an act or measure that was passed, known as the Statute of Westminster, and with that act, it allowed Canada to govern without interference from Britain. As you can see, Canada is slowly moving away from the British Empire and starting to be our own identity and our own country. A new economy. At this time point in the 20s, things changed. There were more goods from the United States than Britain. Increase in industries such as hydroelectric productions and investment. Everyone wanted to be rich in the 20s. Everyone wanted to be rich. World War I was over. Our men, our soldiers were back here in Canada. Things are changing, and we want to be rich. Everyone wanted to be rich and wanted to invest. There was also a new attitude in terms of modern society. There was a growth in the middle class, and there was lots of improvement in schools. So, Canada's in the 20s. I call the 20s a decade of hope because it gave us hope, also known as the Roaring 20s. It was a decade, a time of excitement, prosperity, and good times. Again, things are changing. War was over. Everyone's now happy. Times are changing. We wanted luck. We wanted to become rich. Good fortune was eventually coming around. Upper and middle class, for those folks, it was time of excitement, time of opportunities. However, the working class and the poor class, it was still time of uncertainty, insecurity, and time of disappointment, as they did not know what the future may hold. But if they can afford it, such as the upper middle class, time of excitement, time of opportunities, otherwise known as the decade of hope. Again, in the 20s here in Canada, increase in jobs, industries, urbanization, cities grew and boomed and grew. We had the creation of the telephone, Alexander Graham Bell. We had the growth and the creation in the expanded automobile industry. That was absolutely huge, which Ford and their models and their cars and their colors and the technology is coming out. There was the radio, that was significant. Electricity, medicine, technology. You can see now why the 1920s was exciting. A lot of technologies and development emerged. The stock market grew. It doubled in value. Good sign. And it showed no sign of slowing down. Hence why everyone wanted to invest and everyone wanted to become rich. Okay, again, the 20s was a chance for some to purchase brand new items, brand new products, such as brand new consumer items, a refrigerator, a battery, operated radio, other electronics, a washing machine. Again, automobile became financially accessible. 6 out of 10 families back then in the 20s had cars. Cars and stuff in the automobile industry pretty much changed society as it led to new rules and regulations on roads and highways and the construction of them. So, very exciting time. Again, with the stock market growing and double in value and not slowing down, everyone wanted to make money. Everyone wanted to get rich. However, what was important to note that Canadian societies, there were more haves there was more have-nots than haves. Even though there were technologies, telephone, cars, radio, medicine, electricity, there were more have-nots than haves. Not many people could afford it. Those who can did, but those who don't didn't. But there were more have-nots than haves during that time period. So how did the 1920s ended? Well, the 20s finished basically how it began. Canada was caught up in a recession. Not much change there. Being modern was not as important as having jobs, food, and a roof over our head. That was the main point throughout the 20s. Even though it was a decade of hope, gave us prosperity and hope and optimism, but being modern is not as important as having a job and a shelter. Okay, so that was pretty much that decade. It was like that. Indigenous in the 20s, well, they cannot afford new farming machinery. Some employment in non-Aboriginal workplaces such as logging and fishing. Again, not much improvement in terms of Aboriginal and First Nation population in the 20s. Still not a lot of recognition, not a lot of equalities, hope at that time as well. Alright, so after the 20s, we got the 30s. So understanding Canada in the 30s. We're just zipping along through our timeline. It was a social and economic shock that left millions, and I mean millions, unemployed, hungry, and homeless. Not just here in Canada, but also around the world. What happened, you may wonder? Well, there were many different factors that led to social economic shock that left millions unemployed, hungry, and homeless. There were high tariffs, high taxes, economy dependent on exports, overextending credits, heavy debt loans from years and years, inefficient financial regulations, misguided government interventions, and public panic. So a lot of factors came into play that led to otherwise known as a period of the Great Depression. The Great Depression. Lillian, are you still there with us, Lillian?
Yeah.
Is assignment 7 coming along?
Yeah.
Yeah. Any questions? Any difficulties now? Did you find where the answer are in terms of question number 1?
I'm working on.
You're working on it? Okay, good stuff. Then, like I said, question number 2, the FLQ. It's also on the following page, on page 20 in your textbook. And that's pretty much straightforward. What was the FLQ? And briefly describe it as an organization. Name 2 things that the FLQ did and were responsible for, besides terrorism. Could be violence, bombing, killing, kidnapping. Okay. So again, assignment 7, pretty straightforward. So hopefully you can get that to me by tomorrow. So while we will work super hard on it right now. And then you can get it to me by tomorrow and I'll just mark it. And then one more assignment left in terms of the history half. Assignment number 8. And then you can write the test. And then you'll be halfway officially done this course. But you still need to do the geography half as well. Okay?
Okay.
Good stuff. Okay, but yeah, continue to come to class. Okay, continue to ask questions. Don't worry, I don't mind stopping throughout my lesson. Falling a bit behind, that's okay. I'll eventually get caught up where I need to. What I'm really focused on is that helping students such as you, Lillian, and anyone else that needs to finish the assignments as we only have 7 more weeks left in this term. So I want to see and help students as much as possible finish what they can before summer rolls around. Okay, so again, I think I'm going to stop it here for today. We'll pick up looking at Canada in the Great Depression in the 30s